Good morning and welcome to MAA Week 9 Part 3. We're going to look at working capital, presented as always by Dr. Martin Roberts. So working capital, what is it? It's, as it says there, is the capital available for conducting the day-to-day operations of an organisation. Normally an excess of current assets over current liabilities. So what we're going to look at is we're going to look at the statements of financial position or the balance sheet. We're going to take certain aspects from the balance sheet and we will use it to work out how much cash or capital we have available to run our business. We have two decisions to make when it comes to working capital: the investment decision and the financing decision. We're only going to be looking very briefly at the financing decision. These two particular aspects will be looked at far closer in other modules that you will study here at Sheffield Hallam. Where we're going to look at is using the balance sheet or the statements of financial position, and we're going to look at 5 ratios. Again, they'll probably be better studied elsewhere, but I feel that you need to do this for completeness for management accounting. It's all very well looking at the income statement, but because we run on invoices and we manufacture to make stock or inventory, then we must look at the balance sheet to understand our cash position, and therefore we can run a business in the short term very successfully. So we're going to look at the liquidity ratios, which is very simply the current ratio and the quick ratio or the acid test. And then we're going to look at working capital as I would view it, and we'd look at the efficiency ratios that are inventory turnover, receivables turnover and payables turnover. What we've got with the working capital cycle is that what it does is it's also known as potentially the cash cycle or operating cycle. And the nice thing about that is what it does is it tells you how long it takes from the moment that we start our business and we receive raw materials and we make a product and then we sell it to the customer, is how long all this takes to turn these operations into cash. Okay, so what you've got is you've got a Word document attached with this series, and there are 2 companies that we are going to look at. One's called F PLC and the other is called G PLC, and we're going to use the income statements and the statements of financial position or the profit and loss and the balance sheet, and we're going to use the numbers off those sheets to make sure that we can calculate the current ratio and the acid test and also the working capital position. So in terms of the current ratio, it's incredibly straightforward. You need to go to your balance sheet or statements of financial position, and you need to find your total current assets and your total current liabilities. For your acid test, it's your current assets less your stock or your inventory divided by your current liabilities. Now, why we do the acid test is what we do is we realize that although we've made a lot of stock potentially, is that we may not be able to sell it for anything, and so therefore all that we can claim on are our other assets. So in essence what you're doing is you are comparing your receivables and your cash and seeing if you've got enough money to cover your payables or your creditors. So, in terms of working capital, everything is expressed in days, and in essence it's about how long it takes to turn your invoices into cash, your invoices and your stock into cash. So what we've got is we've got inventory turnover, receivables turnover and payables turnover, all will be expressed in days, hence this times 365. So what it's doing is it's bringing together aspects of the income statement and aspects of the statements of financial position. And so, for example, the first one, the inventory turnover, that's looking at stock divided by cost of sales times 365. Then you've got, again, receivables or debtors divided by sales times 365. And again, the final one, creditors divided by cost of sales times 365. And that's just expressing everything in days. And I'll go into more detail when we calculate the numbers. So let's go back to the first two. Let's have a look at current ratio, which again, like I said, is your current assets divided by your current liabilities for FPLC. And so what you can see there is that number is the number that you can find when you look at your balance sheet for FPLC. So you have 3545, which is your current assets, divided by your current liabilities of 1770, and that's very straightforward. You will get a number close to 2. And you express that like this. You express it as 2 to 1. And what that means is you've got twice as many assets as you have liabilities. So using very rough guidelines that you read in your textbooks and on the internet, is that is a good ratio. We have more assets than we have liabilities. To check how good it is you run the asset test ratio, and you can see that your current assets minus your inventory or your stock, again the number can be found on the balance sheet for FPLC in your handout, divided by your liabilities, you'll have a number that roughly rounds to 1.1 when you put it into your calculator. And what that says is that we're very close to matching our assets with our liabilities, and we've actually got slightly more assets than we have liabilities. So hopefully, initially, that's good news, is that you have enough receivables and cash and other current assets to cover mainly what would be your creditors. So hopefully you've got more money coming in to cover what's going out. So moving on, again using FPLC, this time it's a mixture of the income statements and the statements of financial position. So let's take the first one, our inventory turnover. What that does is you take your inventory number for FPLC from your handout, and you can see 1580. You divide that by the cost of sales that you can find in the income statements, 7345, and then you times it by 365, and that gives you a number that says 78.5 days. What this means is, on average, we hold stock from the moment we've made it and put it into the warehouse. We hold stock on average for 78.5 days before it then goes out and is sold. Now, depending on the nature of the industry, that could be quite a very long time. It's a very expensive time because that means you're going to have a lot of stock, you're going to need a big warehouse, and you're going to have to pay a lot of people to look after it and move it around. So let's move on and we'll have a look at receivables. And receivables is the same, a mixture of you need to go get your debtors number from your statements of financial position, and then you need to go to your income statement and find the sales number. You divide your debtors by your sales times 365, and that gives you 60.78 days. And what that means is it gets close to 61 days before you receive your cash from your debtors. Now this is all because in industry we work via invoices. We will sell people something, and in our terms and conditions we will not want our money right away. We will present them with an invoice that says you have 60 days to pay. So that is usual industry standard. So you leave your product with the customer with a piece of paper with the expectation that that customer will pay in 61 days. And that's potentially the attractiveness of them doing business with you, as you give them time to pay. So the other way around, creditors are people who owe you. Again, you go to the statements of financial position, you find the number, You then go to the cost of sales. Again, you find the number. You divide your creditors number divided by your cost of sales. You times by 365, and that gives you close to 60 days, 59.53 days. So what that means is that you're actually paying your suppliers quicker than you're getting money in. Now that might not be a problem because the numbers are very, very close, but it could be causing you a problem. It could be that you are having to manage with overdrafts, with loans, with goodwill from your suppliers and your customers so that you can balance your books and stay liquid and have enough cash to run the business. Okay, so the final thing to do is to create this idea of a working capital cycle. It's just simply now to use the three results that you had for stock, debtors and creditors, or receivables, inventory and payables, is that now you can actually create a cycle to see on average how long it takes for you to get your money in. So what we're saying is the calculation is very straightforward. You take the inventory turnover in days, you add the receivable collection period in days, and you take away the payable or the creditor's payment period in days. So using F, we would do 78.5 days, which was your stock, plus your receivables number, which is 60.78, you minus 59.53, and in essence what that's saying to you is it takes on average 79.75 days for you to get your money in. So that might be an acceptable number. It depends on the industry, but it does mean that you've got an awful lot of time to, in essence, nearly 3 months to try and manage your cash flow. The smaller that number is, the more liquid you become, and potentially the better you are. Okay, so what I've done is I've left you G PLC to do, hence the very fantastic whizzy graphic that I've left you with. Use your calculator, try to do the same for G, and see if you can work out how liquid G PLC is. So I'm not going to go through it all again. I'm going to leave you the answers. So there's your answers for the working capital cycle for G, and as you can see when you work your way down is that it does take even longer for G to get the money in. Now that could be really bad news for G. It could actually be the nature of the business in. If they're two similar businesses, then you would say that F is working better than G, and G has a lot to work on. It has an incredibly high level of stock, so that says to me if it is the same industry that they have problem selling their product, and so therefore will face in the longer term more problems. Okay, so I will leave it there for you. Please practice and make sure that you understand your working capital cycle, because this is getting close to the final part of your journey with me for management accounting, and so the most important thing is obviously you recognize that we mainly work on the income statement. We're looking at variances, we're looking at budgets, but that does not equal cash. Cash is all about understanding your balance sheet, because the balance sheet works on understanding how much money is owed to you and how much money you owe, and then therefore that's very, very important that you balance that so that you get the cash and you can actually continue operations. Okay, alright, I'll leave it there. Best of luck with everything, and I will see you all soon.